Right, so let's have a little look at what we might say in response to an essay question on Dr Jekyll. So just like normal, I've narrowed it down to 4 points and I've colour coded my analysis so you can see where it hits the mark scheme. So in my introduction, if there are a question about Henry Jekyll, I would be establishing that Stephen shows we have to conform to society's expectations and we cannot indulge our instincts. Stevenson also shows that a positive public persona does not mean our soul is good and true. So what 4 points will I make in response to this question? I would talk about first of all how Jekyll is a reputable public profile, but he enjoys his sordid impulses, and the quote I've got for that is pink are the properties. I'd then talk about Lanyon's rejection of Jekyll's thinking as inaccurate and dangerous, and use the quote wrong in mind for that. And then I'd talk about Jekyll covering up his rotten core with a thin temporary facade, and I've got the symbolism of the laboratory for that for red baize. But Jekyll cannot survive his dual persona, it eventually destroys him, and the quote I've got for that is dreadful shipwreck. So first of all, the first time we hear about Jekyll, he is described as the pink of the properties. So he's got a reputable public profile, he's considered the best of the best by Enfield, reflective of how society looks up to him. Now this is quite ironic because society doesn't realise just how much they want to be like him and also indulge their impulses. At this point the public are not aware that Jekyll has got this dark side called Hyde, but we do know that we all have those impulses to be free. We want to release ourselves from the shackles of society sometimes. Now this may reflect Stevenson's personal existence. He was born into wealth and prestige, but he always admired and enjoyed the poorer, more immoral aspects of life. Now this is reflected by the adjective pink. Now this shows he's got a rose-tinted view of life because he gets to enjoy the comfort and pleasure of society, being at the top of society, but he also gets to enjoy the freedom of Hyde. And the noun properties connotes the wealth and prestige, so Jekyll conforms to what society perceives as good. He ticks all the boxes of what we believe is someone to be admired, respected and looked up to. Then I look at this quote here, wrong in mind. So Lanyon rejects Jekyll's thinking as inaccurate and dangerous. This reflects the intolerance of new scientific thinking of the Victorian era. Utterson expects them to be friends as they have a common interest, but Lanyon's limited rational mindset forbids this. Now this is a danger of the rejection of Jekyll. Lanyon is denied a true understanding of humanity and therefore is denied the whole point of science. If science is about improving us and improving humanity through progress and understanding, Lanyon is denied that chance because he will not accept Jekyll in his thinking. Now the intolerance of this approach ultimately costs him his life, and that's an important debate to have in your essay, is how much is Jekyll responsible for the death of his friend Lanyon. Now Jekyll was presented as misunderstood and victimised. But then I'd look at the repetition of the word wrong here from Lanyon. Wrong is in meaning incorrect, but also wrong in mind reflects being mentally unstable. So it's an outright complete rejection of Jekyll's science as dangerously wrong. But this is quite ironic. It is actually Jekyll who is right all along, and it is Lanyon's mental state that is then warped by the truth. Then I'd look at this bit of symbolism here, and we go to Jekyll's laboratory, which is covered in red baize. Now Jekyll covers up his rotten core with a thin temporary facade, just like baize. Baize is a thin material used to cover things that are old and ugly. So this reflects how Jekyll covers up his rotten core with something that looks nice, but it's fake. But the key thing about baize, it doesn't last long, and then it looks even worse. It looks really ugly when it's old and tatty. So this reflects the inevitability of Jekyll's facade going, and then Hyde being exposed. Now this reflects the pressures of Victorian society to have a public approved reputation image no matter how bad your core is. But then the reason why I love this quote so much is you've got this great adjective red here. Now there's loads of things to say about this. Red connotes danger, showing how it's dangerous for Jekyll to keep and indulge Hyde. But red also connotes to love. So Jekyll enjoys having this free side he can indulge. But finally, red is also a warning. So this connotes that this is a warning to society of the danger of having this dual persona, indulging it, keeping it and letting it run free. Finally, I'd end my essay looking at this quote here, when Jekyll talks about how he ended up as a dreadful shipwreck, having to live with Hyde. So he couldn't survive his dual persona, it destroyed him. Now I love this because of the reference to a ship. Jekyll was like a ship. He kept leaving the security of society the same way a ship leaves the land, but ships must eventually return to this, but Jekyll doesn't, and therefore his destruction was inevitable. Now the noun shipwreck is a total destruction that cannot be saved, symbolising how Jekyll's demise was total and unsalvageable. But ships are also associated with adventure and discovery, which reflects Jekyll's addiction, because he believed he was an adventurous discovery, but it ended in disaster due to his addiction and his denial of it. Now, if Jekyll symbolises Stevenson, which I believe he does, this may reflect Stevenson's own struggles with addiction, and the feeling he too had hit rock bottom by the time he'd come to write the story of Dr Jekyll and Mr Hyde.